Great. Well, why don't we get started? And I'm here today with Justin Welsh. Do you want to tell us first of all, what's your Substack? Where can people subscribe?
Yeah, my Substack is actually called Unsubscribe, which is a strange name to name an email list or a newsletter. But it's called Unsubscribe, and you can just go to the unsubscribed.co. And it's really all about sort of the intersection of life and business. So I'm trying to write for people who have stepped off the default path, who have essentially unsubscribed from that default path in life. And I help them formulate a business that really supports a life they enjoy instead of, the hustle culture or the grind that I see so popular on social media.
That's cool. Is that what you did?
Yeah, that's what I did. I had sort of a weird arc, if you will. I was in the tech space for a long time. I was chief revenue officer of a couple SaaS companies that were really successful, a couple unicorns. Busted my butt, worked really, really hard, burned out to a crisp in late 2018. Started my own business. It boomed pretty early as a consultant for healthcare companies in the SaaS world, and then pivoted into writing about audience building and building your own businesses online. And it's just been this wild whirlwind where I worked really hard and grinded myself into a pulp. And as I get a little older and kind of figure out how to do this a little bit better, it's been more about the balance of life and work for me.
That's really cool. I sometimes feel like on the internet in general, many people who are writing about how to make your own business, how to be successful, how to do this, that, or the other thing are people that haven't necessarily done that themselves.
Sure.
And it kind of raises the question like, all right, why am I taking your advice on this topic? But you're kind of different. You've done that thing, you've done that grind. Like do you think that changes how you approach the topic with people?
I think so, right? I have like this odd opinion where I understand what you mean when you say that, right? Like there are folks who come in and maybe they haven't accomplished like objectively what we might consider like something big. But I also believe to an extent there's a lot of people on the internet and in the world that just need help from someone who are a few steps ahead of them. And so I kind of think about it in this linear path where it's like, sure, I was a chief revenue officer. I had a lot of great experience. I started late on the online game in my late 30s after collecting 16 years of experience in the corporate world. So hopefully my advice will be relevant to those folks who are a few years behind me. But even if you're in your early 20s and you just graduated college, there are relevant challenges and things that you've overcome that might be helpful to someone who's 4 years behind you. And so that's how I sort of think about weeding through the different advice on the internet, if you will.
Very cool. Well, what have you been covering lately? What's at the top of your mind?
Yeah, I think the things at the top of my mind that I've been covering lately is really around this topic of enough. And so I don't know if you've been privy to seeing some of the stuff that's come out over the last 2 months that have, gone viral, whether it's the sort of early morning workout routine of dunking your face in the water and, running sprints by 4:53 a.m. and just sort of doing all this crazy stuff or the constant talk around, scaling to the moon, right? Everything is about scale, it's about growth, it's about pushing, it's about more. And like I've gotten to the point where I'm trying to address this idea of leaving something left in the towel. So like instead of trying to wring everything that you can, every last drop out of yourself, your business, your network, your customers, I'm trying to sort of re-emphasize this idea of enoughness, right? What is enough in the world? And so my wife and I have been really reflecting on our own personal lives, our own businesses over the last 6 to 12 months and saying to ourselves like could we blow it out? Yeah, sure, if we really wanted to, but like what's the balance of enoughness both in a personal life, in your business life? And so we're really recalibrating, and as I learn how to recalibrate myself, I'm sharing it with my audience. And I always tell the folks who are reading my stuff like I'm not writing because I'm the expert. I'm writing at myself as my own personal therapist. So if you see me saying something, it's because I'm lecturing myself after having failed or after having gone through a challenge time and time again. So I don't know if that resonates with you and how you may be right, but that's how I've always written.
So what are some of the things that you've changed in your own life now that you have this kind of enough
Yeah.
enlightenment?
Yeah. I think one for me is over the course of time, I've tried really hard to understand the sort of 80-20 rule really effectively in my life and my business. As a person, I'm a control freak. I have anxiety. I have a lot of those things that sometimes work really well for being an entrepreneur and founding a business. But I recognize that if I lean into my natural characteristics, I can work all day if I want to. I can find something to fill every single block on my calendar if I really want to try hard to do it. And sometimes I don't have to try that hard. So what I've really been trying to do over the last 12 months is say, what are the 20% of things that I do on a regular basis that actually move the needle 80%, right? Everyone knows about Pareto's principle in law. But that has been an exercise that has actually been quite difficult to do, is to figure out what are those things that actually move the needle. And so as I've learned what those are and I've come to grips with what those things are, I've started reverse engineering how I used to build things. It used to be that like I would fill my calendar with all the things that I thought were important, and then I would find the blocks in between those things to live my life. And now I'm doing it the reverse. I'm actually building my life inside of my calendar, all the things I love to do, from going on walks in the morning to going in the gym to listening to music to reading, cooking with my wife, being outdoors. That's my calendar now, and I'm kind of filling in the blanks with the 20% of work. And so that sort of reverse or flip for me has been really, really important, but certainly not easy, if you will.
Very cool. Um, One thing I did wanna ask, so you've had this variety of experiences in life. You're building this, internet business, as you're saying. What's your experience like been on Substack, and how can we make it better?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, man. It's been great. Let's start with all the things that I love about Substack that come to mind. I think it's um, the safest, easiest place to both create and consume interesting content right now. I wrote this to my audience the other day. LinkedIn, where I started creating content, but that's sort of my background. Is I started there when it wasn't really a content creation platform, and helped solidify it as one. Um, it's become, as a lot of social media will always be and has been, quite performative, right? So there's a lot of performance based stuff going on over there, and you feel like you start to blend in with all the performers. I found Twitter and X to be mean, divisive, and
Yeah.
cruel, and
Still performative, but just harsher.
yeah, just harsher. And Substack just seems to be like really smart, thoughtful, intelligent people, both creating and consuming content. So I love that about Substack. I love the fact that it's very easy to set up and send my emails out. Like, set it up, create a post, send it out. Like, it works really well. It gets delivered. Like, all that stuff has been super seamless. Um, and then I also think it's been really an excellent place for me to discover new talent. So one thing that I don't love about traditional social media platforms is they're sort of primed for folks with big audiences, right? Huge followings. And I feel like on Substack every day I discover somebody new that's small, that's writing something really interesting. And like, from an art and creative perspective, that's what the platform, in my opinion, should serve to do. It should serve everybody equally. And I think that Substack does that really, really intelligently. I think just some of the challenges for me are just, coming from places that, generally have wild customization. So being able to really customize what I offer to certain people at certain tiers, hasn't, I wouldn't call it frustrating. It's just been an opportunity where I had to get a little more creative than I might have to get with other platforms. But as far as I'm concerned, and as I study Substack, it's been my understanding that Substack has been growing and changing with the creative entrepreneurs on board. And so I'm patient, and I understand what it's like to build a company. So like, I understand that, like, if you throw a bunch of stuff at the CEO or their team, it's not on them to just rocket those things out. So I'm sitting back and waiting to see what Substack hears from folks like me and other people, and I would imagine they will prioritize those features they hear most of. But so far, super enjoyable, man. And I've been trying to bring a lot of folks over that like my writing and enjoy Substack. So hopefully you'll see some growth on that end.
That's fantastic. Thank you
Yeah,
for doing that.
of course.
Um, I'm curious because you have a pretty big presence on LinkedIn, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, about
And
750,000 or so, yeah.
wild. And it's been a little bit of, I think I'm maybe one of the people in the world who the size and scale of LinkedIn as a social media platform has taken us a little bit by surprise. Like, I kind of have like a flash bulb in my mind of LinkedIn as sort of like the resume website, but it's
Yeah,
become, one of the biggest sources of, you know, social discovery, let's say, on the internet.
yeah.
And I'm curious, like, what you what you think of that platform, how you think it's different than other platforms. And one thing I'm interested in is I think I see people on Substack sometimes
Yeah,
saying, "Oh man, I sure hope this place doesn't get LinkedInified.
sure,
I don't want Substack to be like the LinkedIn, like to turn into
sure,
LinkedIn.
sure, sure.
That's what I'm here to avoid." Maybe here's the sharp version of this question. What do you think is the great part about LinkedIn? What are the parts of LinkedIn that it would be good if Substack brought? And which parts should we be careful to avoid?
That's a really good question. I think some of the stuff that makes LinkedIn great, on the positive side might be hard to replicate on Substack, but so I'll kind of share why I think that is. So the first thing is that, LinkedIn in general, you know that the folks who are on there are real. They have or to an extent, they're pretty real, right? They have a nice verification process. So
They're
you know
actually humans. They may be pretty
right.
fake, but they're flesh and
Right.
blood.
Exactly. They're flesh and blood people, right? And so you don't have that on the same on X, and you can't do anything really anonymously there. I think also you know how to navigate and find decision makers. So if you're creating content for very specific types of people at very specific types of companies, LinkedIn gives you all the features and filters to be able to target that audience very effectively, right? Whereas Twitter doesn't, as Substack doesn't, LinkedIn, you're like, great, I sell marketing services to healthcare companies at the director level, like great. Here's a 10,000 possible customers, and that becomes really interesting. I think some of the stuff that when people talk about being afraid that Substack becomes the next LinkedIn, I think it's but let's look at it as like a spectrum, right? So like X or Twitter has really great short form writers for the most part. And if you are overly vulnerable, or if you write something that people might consider like cringy, right? And by the way, that's subjective, so there's lots of different stuff.
Right.
You're gonna get kind of booted off X, or people are gonna make fun of you, which
Yeah.
never feels really
Or
great,
worse,
right?
yeah, worse, you're going to become the main character, which is
Right.
actually the worst day of your life.
Right, exactly, right? I've had it happen. It's not super fun. Whereas on LinkedIn, like it's since it's professional and since everyone's names are attached to their company, no one really speaks up about that kind of stuff. There's no negativity, right? So LinkedIn gets flooded with vulnerability and selfies and all this kind of stuff, and a lot of AI commenting, and a lot of no one ever really has like a robust discussion. There's no like, hey, I disagree fundamentally with what you're saying, and we're going to kind of have a disagreement like you might see on X. So what it becomes is sort of this big fluffy land of agreement. And I think that Substack, I don't believe Substack will fall into that trap, because number one, people's names and faces aren't next to the company they work for, and number two, I found just overall people in general are having high quality discussions and high quality debates that I'm not seeing on a lot of places on the internet. And I think when I came over and a few other like writers came over at the same time, people were like, "Oh, there's some big creators or writers coming over, and I'm angry about it," or and very candidly, I'm not here to write uh bangers, right? That's like not what I'm here to write. I'm here to write like I'm here to share my creativity, and this is a creative outlet for me in a place where I'll do a bunch of different writing. I'm not trying to go viral on Substack. I'm trying to have fun, be creative.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like we have no shortage of people willing to disagree with each other, which is
Yeah,
a blessing.
I've seen it. I've seen it, which is great, by the way. It's
Uh,
better than everyone, suggesting they agree with one another,
yeah, or pretending or glossing
pretending.
over.
Yeah.
We're starting to get some bangers too. I see some bangers in my nose feed. I always like it. Um,
Yeah, I love that, by the way. Like one thing I didn't say is I love the integration, the ecosystem. Part of why I chose Substack, so to give you some context, when I wanted to write this newsletter, I wanted a place to be my creative self. I didn't want to grow a huge business. I didn't want to go viral. But I love creative writing, both short form and long form. And I had originally looked at something like Ghost. And what I recognized in Ghost is that sure, there's some creative this, creative that, some custom stuff. But I love the notes concept on Substack, because it felt like a place where I could like lean into being authentic and personal and creative, but would play in the same ecosystem as my newsletter. And I love how sort of those things, and I'm still working out how they all work together, but I love how it's just sort of all in one cohesive place. And I've been digging that. I've been digging Substack notes a lot.
that's awesome. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, you're writing this stuff that's it's partly about being an entrepreneur, but some of it's about just being a person, how to
Yeah.
live your best life, how to think about things. I mean, have you been thinking a lot about how that changes or how it stays the same as AI takes over? becomes very powerful? Is this something that is in your wheelhouse to talk about? And what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, right, it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's hard to avoid. And it's definitely becoming more of a part of my creative entrepreneur's journey, right? Um, what I have found is as I've tested it to do different things, like imagine you test it to write a piece of social media content. After a while, you actually lose the muscle of being able to write something with a blank
Mhm.
piece of paper. And that's a muscle that I don't want to lose, right? So I write all of my unsubscribed issues. They're all human written by me, right? I use AI to do a lot of different things. I use AI mostly as a way to like do like pattern detection. So, um, for instance, when I write my emails out and I get 1,000 replies from my audience, I do a lot of pattern detection with AI. Like, does this topic resonate? What are people saying? What's the most common types of feedback? When I create content, I have like an kind of a bell curve. I 10% that are duds, 10% that people really seem to like, and 80% that are sort of in the middle. And by using a lot of the data on stuff that I create, I'm not trying to go more viral. I'm trying to get a sense of what does my audience want to, what do they care about? What do they want to hear about? Because my goal, again, yeah, you can try and say whatever you want to say to get 10,000 or 20,000 engagements. I'd rather just write stuff that my audience cares about. And so by using AI, I actually think it's not taking away from authenticity. It's giving me an either easier version to seeing like
Yeah.
what people want to read from me. And so I'm going to use it to the extent that I can in that arena.
That's always felt like the good version of the future to me. Is
Yeah.
a world where AI is not replacing, the core thing you're doing, but it's giving you creative leverage. You have this vision, you have this perspective that you're bringing, you have this human connection that you're making with the people who are showing up, but it's making it possible for you to do more than you
Yeah.
could have done before. Maybe it's helping you do the editing, or it's helping you do the research, or it's helping you, it becomes kind of this, accelerant for realizing your own creative vision. And I think that's the version of it that's compelling too, right? There's already, even before AI, there's no shortage of slop on the internet. There's no shortage of kind of
Right.
low
Right.
effort stuff that proliferates. Some would say even or especially on LinkedIn, but people have
Sure.
different views.
Sure. For sure.
Um, but I think that stuff, like, it's not good. And I think you can see when there's somebody that's brought a their own perspective, even if the thing is written or made, or the actual media has been used, digital AI tools to make it. It's kind of like the core vision is the thing. And if you can make the technology amplify that, I think it's kind of like an exciting future.
I agree. I think where I get like I don't know if like downtrodden is the right word, but like I get kind of sad about it is by the way, I don't know, how old you are. I'll be 44 here next month. So I remember a time both without the internet, with the internet, with the internet without AI, and with the internet with AI, right? So I'm like in this kind of sweet spot where I've kind of gone through that whole different linear journey, if you will. And I guess as I see younger folks leaning really heavily into AI, I wonder if we're gonna miss that like idea of creating something from
Mhm.
scratch, right? Like having an idea percolate in your brain from the very beginning and writing incredible music, writing incredible poetry, making great movies. Like I see every day that I log on, like, oh, watch out, studios, AIs coming to do this. It's like, I don't know. There's something great about seeing someone write an incredible script and pick the right actors and get the right music. And like, I love the combination of that creative outlet. And so I worry about that. But then again, I'm also older and like, I don't understand it all that well. And I can imagine, that much like folks 40 years ago were worried about something else, like I'll probably be the guy that's worried about this and people will figure out how to always be creative. So, I feel good about it sometimes. I feel bad about it sometimes, but overall it's happening. So I got to roll with it.
Yeah. Well, I'll reveal my age by talking about a core memory I have, which is, as a kid, one of my friends handing me a bootleg VHS tape with the first episode of South Park on it.
Nice.
And it was like somebody's uncle had 2 VHSs so they could copy, this video was going viral. And in retrospect, the first episode of South Park is really tame actually, but it seemed very, it seemed
Oh, yeah.
crazy at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And the fact that, these two guys somewhere in their basement or wherever they were doing it had been able to make a TV show was kind of a revelation. That seemed like something that was out of reach of any old person to do. And here was somebody that had gone and done it, and it was in some ways the technology had made that possible. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm, like, most excited for. I think there will be things that people, I got taught cursive writing in elementary school. They're like, "You'll use it all the time," and I never used
Yeah,
it, and
yeah, yeah,
can't
yeah.
do it very
Never.
well anymore, and
Same.
in some ways, that's a tragedy. Um, and there and there will be I think there will be real things that are lost, but it's the thing that's hard to predict is what are the new things that will get created.
Of course. Yeah. And I'm optimistic about those things. By the way, I think I can only lean pessimistic because I don't know what's even out there, right? I don't know what I don't know. Um, but to me, like I think where it's been really helpful also is we all live in our own echo chambers as much as we don't maybe want to admit that, right? We live in our own echo chambers geographically, politically, all the things that we think about so many different things. And what AI has actually been really helpful for me as well, especially around like ideas I want to write about, things I think about, is like playing the devil's advocate, being contrarian, poking holes in the way that I think. And I think it's allowed me to almost in a very weird way be more empathetic. When I don't agree with somebody on social media or in real life, all I can do is rely on the things that I know about a certain topic. And so by being able to go back and like actually educate myself, maybe in an unbiased way, I found myself becoming more empathetic to people who think differently than I do, find themselves in different situations than I am, who are politically different than I am. And I don't know about you, but like I feel like that's super needed right now. And so I'm trying to lean into using AI to make me more balanced, I guess, for lack of a better description.
Fantastic. Well, this has been really interesting. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
No, I mean I would just I wanted to come on and just tell you I'm really excited about Substack. You know, I didn't know what I was getting into when I signed up for it. A couple of my friends, Paul Millard and Steve Schloffman, had started some really cool Substacks here, and I always found myself reading those on a regular basis. And I didn't really know what I was getting into when I signed up, but I think you're creating a world that is very, very needed right now. I think from the agreeable everything LinkedIn to the I hate everyone and everything X or Twitter, like Substack is in a really good spot in between, and it feels kind of like a little hidden secret right now. And maybe people will blame me if they other people follow me onto Substack, but like nothing stays secret for a long time. That's super useful and super fun to be on. So I know you guys are growing like wildfire, so it's not really a secret, but it feels like
Yeah.
like a little
Don't
secret to
don't
me.
keep the secret. You can tell
Yeah,
the world, tell
I
everyone
won't,
about it.
man. I won't.
And
And I think one last thing is like I'm excited to see how you guys think about in the future helping guys like me and people out there curate and find really interesting and awesome writers because that's something I've really enjoyed about Substack. Like I said before, stumbling upon these writers that I've never heard of and reading an article and being like, I got to read everything this person writes. So
very cool. Well, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for using Substack. We appreciate you being here. I'm going to say something that's going to sound ridiculous, but press the subscribe button to subscribe to unsubscribe if you're
that's right.
interested in these ideas.
That's right. That's right. Chris, thanks so much for having me, man. And great to get to know you. And thanks everyone for listening. And I hope to see you guys all on Substack.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
See you, buddy.